I always believed I had it all. A thriving business, a loving wife, and two wonderful kids who were nearly adults, ready to carve their own paths in life. Our family had always been strong, bound by love, mutual respect, and an unshakable sense of unity. Mia, my wife, was my anchor. She had stood by my side through the years, supporting me as I built my company from the ground up. She had been my confidant, my partner, the mother of my children. I trusted her implicitly, never questioning her loyalty or devotion. Our home was filled with laughter, shared meals, and the kind of quiet moments that made life feel meaningful. Sunday mornings with the smell of fresh coffee in the air, the sound of my daughter singing in the shower, and my son arguing about sports with me, it all felt perfect. If someone had told me that everything I cherished would soon crumble before my eyes, I would have laughed in their face. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. The accident, it was supposed to be just another day. I had a meeting scheduled downtown, nothing out of the ordinary. But life has a way of flipping everything upside down in an instant. I don't remember much about the accident itself, just the blinding headlights of an oncoming truck, the sickening crunch of metal, and the unbearable pain that shot through my body like a wildfire. Then, darkness. I woke up in the hospital, my head heavy, my mouth dry, my limbs numb. I tried to move, but nothing happened. Panic clawed at my throat as I turned my eyes to Mia, who was sitting beside my bed, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. "Baby," she whispered, gripping my hand. "You're awake." I could barely speak. "What happened?" She hesitated. "You were in an accident. The doctors, they say there's a chance you might not be able to walk again." The words slammed into me harder than the truck had. "No." That couldn't be right. I was a man who thrived on movement, running my business, playing basketball with my son, dancing with my daughter in the living room just to make her laugh. The idea of being confined to a wheelchair for the rest of my life was unfathomable. My children arrived soon after, their faces a mixture of relief and fear. They hugged me, told me they loved me, reassured me that everything would be okay. But behind their words, I saw the uncertainty. The worry about what this meant for our family, for their future. Mia put on a brave face, but I could see the cracks forming. At first, she was by my side constantly, helping me with everything, forcing a smile, trying to stay positive. But as the days stretched into weeks, something changed. She became distant. At first, I chalked it up to stress. After all, someone had to keep things running while I was stuck in this damn hospital bed. She started spending more time at my company, handling affairs I could no longer oversee. One evening, she sat beside me, her expression unreadable. "I've taken over things at work," she said. "I had to. The business can't run itself. I nodded slowly. "I appreciate it." She gave me a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Someone has to provide for the family now, right?" Something about the way she said it twisted in my gut. The days blurred together. I remained in the hospital, enduring painful therapy sessions, fighting against a body that refused to cooperate. I had always been the strong one, the provider, the leader. Now, I was nothing more than a burden. I watched as Mia slowly shifted, her focus from me to the business, from comforting me to making sure our financial stability remained intact. She still visited, still kissed me goodbye before leaving, but I could feel the distance between us widening. I tried to stay hopeful, to believe that things would get better, but the reality was crushing. I was useless. I had gone from a man at the top of his game to a shadow of my former self, trapped in a body that refused to obey me. And worse, Mia was slipping away. The thoughts started creeping in late at night when I was alone with nothing but the quiet hum of hospital machines. Wouldn't it be easier to just let go? If I wasn't here, they wouldn't have to suffer. Mia wouldn't have to carry the weight of my failures. My children wouldn't have to see their father wasting away in a wheelchair. The idea of ending it all became a persistent whisper in the back of my mind. And then, there was her. She wasn't much older than my daughter, early 20s, with sharp eyes that saw through every mask I tried to wear. Her name was Anna, a young nurse with ambitions of becoming a psychiatrist. At first, I resented her presence. She was too cheerful, too persistent, always pushing me to talk, to feel. One night, after a particularly brutal therapy session, she sat beside my bed, tapping her pen against her clipboard. "You think you're worthless, don't you?" She said bluntly. I scoffed. "You don't know what you're talking about." She tilted her head. "I do, actually. I've seen it before. Men who lose their sense of purpose and start believing they have no value left. You're not useless. You're just lost." I turned away, unwilling to engage. She sighed, setting her clipboard down. "Fine. Ignore me. But I'll be here tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that, until you finally decide to start fighting again." I hated her in that moment. I hated her for seeing through me, for refusing to let me drown in my own misery. But somehow, she became the only person I could be honest with. Slowly, she chipped away at my defenses. She listened when I raged, when I broke down, when I admitted that I didn't see a future for myself anymore. And she didn't pity me. She challenged me. "You can let this destroy you," she said one evening. "Or you can take back your life. It's your choice." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. And so, for the first time since the accident, I dared to consider a different future. One where I wasn't just a man trapped in a chair. One where I could stand again, where I could fight. Little did I know, I would need that strength more than ever. At first, I told myself it was just stress. Mia had been handling the company alone for months while I wasted away in this damn wheelchair. It was natural that she was exhausted, overwhelmed, but there was something different about her. She wasn't just tired, she was distant. She spent more and more time at work, coming home late, barely acknowledging me before heading straight to the shower. She didn't linger by my side anymore, didn't ask about my therapy sessions. When she looked at me, it wasn't with love or concern, it was with something else. Pity, discomfort, annoyance, and then there were the changes. Mia had always been beautiful, but now she was glowing. New clothes, elegant yet subtle. Expensive perfume, one I didn't recognize. Her hair was always perfect, her nails freshly manicured. It was as if she had transformed overnight from a weary wife into a woman reclaiming her youth. For weeks, I forced myself to believe it was nothing. That I was just paranoid, bitter, looking for something to blame for the growing emptiness between us. But then came the first real sign. It happened late one evening. Mia was sitting on the couch across from me, scrolling through her phone. Her expression was unreadable, her lips pressed together in a tight line. I was about to ask her something, maybe about her day, maybe about us, when suddenly her phone buzzed. I didn't even mean to look, but the screen lit up at just the right angle, revealing a name I didn't recognize. She inhaled sharply, her entire body tensing. Then, with a speed that startled me, she flipped the phone over, pressing it against her lap. Something inside me twisted. "Who was that?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Just a work thing." I nodded slowly, my gaze lingering on her face. "A work thing that made you jump like you saw a ghost?" Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt? Annoyance? "I'm just tired, okay? Can we not do this?" "Do what, exactly?" I hadn't accused her of anything, but her reaction was telling. That night, as she lay beside me in bed, her back turned, her breathing slow and steady, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I didn't want to be that man, the pathetic, paranoid husband who searched for signs of betrayal where none existed. But deep down, I already knew. Something was wrong. A few weeks later, Mia threw me a birthday party. It was her idea, though it felt more like an obligation than a celebration. The guest list was packed with old friends, family, and a few new faces. business partners Mia had recently started working with. She introduced them one by one, smiling that effortless, practiced smile of hers. But it wasn't until I saw him that my stomach turned to stone, tall, confident, dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than my entire therapy bill. His name was Damien, and the moment Mia looked at him, something in her eyes changed. Admiration, excitement, longing. It was subtle, but I saw it. And suddenly, every late night, every change in her appearance, every hushed phone call made sense. Watched them from across the room, my hands gripping the arms of my wheelchair. She laughed at something he said, tucking her hair behind her ear the way she used to do when we were young, when she was still mine. For the rest of the evening, I forced myself to play the role of the grateful husband. I smiled. I nodded. I accepted the well wishes. But inside, I was burning. And then, fate decided to give me the final piece of the puzzle. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, I rolled my chair toward my study, needing a moment of solitude. But the moment I reached the door, I froze. Inside, voices. Mia's and his. "He's still holding on," she murmured, her tone hushed but urgent. "I keep pushing, but he won't sign over full control." Damien chuckled. "You just need to be patient. Once he does, he'll be out of the picture for good." A long pause. Then, the soft, unmistakable sound of lips meeting. I felt my chest tighten, my breath hitch. I shouldn't have looked. I should have turned away. But some twisted part of me needed to see. Slowly, I pushed the door open just an inch, and there they were. Mia pressed against my desk, her hands gripping his suit jacket. Damien leaning into her, one hand tangled in her hair. My wife, kissing another man in my office. The room spun. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. The betrayal, the humiliation, it was suffocating. They wanted to take everything from me, my company, my dignity, my life. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't broken. Not yet. And I would make them regret ever thinking I was. I had spent months drowning in self-pity, convincing myself that I was nothing, more than a burden, a powerless man trapped in a body that refused to obey. But that night, standing outside my own office, watching my wife kiss another man while they plotted to steal my life from me, something inside me snapped. The despair that had shackled me for so long burned away, leaving only something raw, something dangerous. Rage. Not the kind that made men reckless. No, this was a fire that sharpened my mind, that cleared away the fog of self-doubt and filled me with a singular, undeniable purpose. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. I wasn't going to let them win, but to do that, I had to become someone else, someone stronger, someone they would never see coming. The next morning, I called Anna. She had been my only lifeline these past months, the only person who had seen me at my lowest and still believed in me. And now, I needed her more than ever. "I need your help." I told her when she arrived, her sharp eyes scanning my face, sensing the shift in me. She sat down across from me. "What changed?" I hesitated. I didn't tell her about Mia. Not yet. Instead, I just said, "I'm done feeling sorry for myself. I need to walk again, not for them, for me." For a long moment, she studied me as if searching for hesitation, doubt. She found none. Then she nodded. "Then let's get to work." The next day, she introduced me to someone new, Dr. Carter, a no-nonsense rehabilitation specialist with a reputation for achieving miracles. "She says she wants to walk," he muttered, crossing his arms as he studied me. "You willing to suffer for it?" I met his gaze, my jaw tightening. "Try me." The next few months were hell. Every day, before the sun even rose, I pushed my body further than I ever had before. Every muscle screamed in agony, every nerve protested against the sheer force of my determination, but I refused to stop. At first, I couldn't even stand for more than a few seconds without collapsing. But I didn't quit. Every time I hit the ground, I thought about Mia, about Damien, about the way she had looked at him like he was the man she admired. That was enough to make me get back up. Anna was there every step of the way. She wasn't gentle, wasn't soft. She pushed me harder than anyone had ever dared, dragging me out of my misery every time I started slipping back into it. "You're not broken," she told me after one brutal session. "You never were. You just forgot who the hell you are." Bit by bit, I rebuilt myself, and I told no one. Mia barely noticed. She was so busy running my company, spending late nights at meetings, that she barely acknowledged my presence anymore. When she was home, she was polite but distant, like a nurse checking on a patient she didn't care about. I let her believe I was still the same weak, dependent man she had written off. I let her see only what she wanted to see. I stayed in my wheelchair when she was around, moving sluggishly, playing the role of a defeated husband. But the moment she left, I was on my feet. At night, when the house was silent, I would pull myself up, forcing my legs to hold my weight, walking across my room in painful, trembling steps. By the time I could move without collapsing, I knew I was ready. One evening, Mia came home with an unusual look in her eyes. It was the first time in weeks she had actually seemed to care about what I was doing. "We need to talk," she said, sitting down across from me, her expression carefully measured. I already knew what she was about to say. She folded her hands on the table. "I think it's time we made things official about the company." I tilted my head. "Official?" She sighed, as if she were the one who had been burdened by all of this. "You're still the CEO on paper, but we both know you're not in any condition to run things. The board is concerned. It would be easier if I had full control. Just legally, of course." I let out a slow breath, pretending to consider it. "You want me to sign everything over to you?" She reached out, placing her hand on mine. The touch felt foreign now. "It's what's best for everyone, baby. You know that, right?" I looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right." Her lips parted slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to agree so easily. "I'll do it," I said. "But I want to do it officially, in front of the board. Let's schedule a meeting and I'll sign the papers there." Her smile was instant. She had no idea what was coming. The day of the meeting arrived. I played my part perfectly. Let her see me weak. Let her believe I would roll into that boardroom a defeated man, ready to surrender everything to her. The conference room was filled with executives, employees, and business partners, all waiting for the moment Mia had so carefully orchestrated. The door opened, and instead of a wheelchair, I walked in. Gasps rippled through the room. I was dressed in a tailored suit, my steps confident, steady. I carried a folder in my hands, one that wasn't filled with the documents Mia had been expecting. For the first time in months, I saw real shock in her eyes. I smiled. "I hope everyone's doing well. Let's get started." She barely managed to hide her panic. "You..." Her voice wavered. "You're... walking?" I finished for her. "Yeah. Turns out I'm not as weak as you thought." I dropped the folder onto the table in front of her. "You wanted papers, right?" I said. "Go ahead, open them." Her hands trembled as she reached for the documents. And then, as she flipped through the pages, her face drained of color. Because instead of a transfer of power, they were divorce papers. And alongside them, evidence of her affair. Bank statements, recorded conversations. Enough to ensure that she walked away with nothing. I leaned in, keeping my voice low. "You thought you were getting rid of me? Taking everything I built? Turns out you were the one being played." Damien's face twisted with fury, but I didn't even look at him. This moment belonged to me. Mia's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. I straightened, buttoning my suit jacket. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run." The silence in the boardroom was deafening. Mia's face had turned a sickly shade of white as she stared at the documents in front of her. Damien, the man she had staked everything on, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. his confidence evaporating like mist under the morning sun. For months, they had plotted to take my company, to cast me aside like I was nothing. And now, they had. Nothing. I let the weight of the moment settle over them before I spoke again. "I bet you thought you had it all figured out," I said, my voice calm, steady, stronger. "That I was broken, that I'd just hand over everything and fade into the background." Mia opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "No," I said simply. "You don't get to talk. Not now." She flinched. I turned my attention to the rest of the board. "Let me make something clear. I am not stepping down. I am not handing over my company to anyone. And as of today, all business ties between this company and Damien's firm are severed." Damien straightened in his chair. "You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted, my gaze locking onto his. "And I already have." I gestured to another folder sitting in front of one of my trusted advisors. "Legal already took care of it. Every contract you had with us, terminated. Every deal you thought you were securing, gone." His jaw clenched. "You son of a—" I stepped closer. "You played your hand too soon, Damien. You thought you could slither into my company, into my marriage, and that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't fight back?" He scoffed, but I could see the cracks in his confidence. "You think this scares me?" I smirked. "No, but what happens next should." I nodded to one of my security officers, who stepped forward and slid a small USB drive across the table. "I had you followed," I said simply. "Every meeting, every transaction, every under-the-table deal you made using my company's resources." Mia's head snapped toward him in shock. "What?" Damien went rigid. I tilted my head. "Didn't tell her, did you? That you weren't just using me? You were using her too?" Mia's breath hitched as she grabbed the USB, her fingers trembling, as she scanned the contents on the screen in front of her. Bank records, emails, secret payments. She looked up at him, realization dawning. "You son of a b— Oh, now you're upset?" I laughed. "You betrayed me, Mia, and the man you threw your life away for? He was never planning to keep you around once he got what he wanted." I turned back to Damien. "And now? Now? You have nothing. No contracts, no reputation, no company." I leaned in slightly. "And trust me, by the time I'm done, you won't even be employable." His fists clenched, but he said nothing. He knew he had lost. Mia, on the other hand, was still in denial. "Baby," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "Please, we can fix this. I loved you." I pulled my hand away as if her touch burned. "No, Mia. You loved what I gave you." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. For the first time in months, I felt free. I straightened my suit, grabbed my documents, and turned to the board. "This meeting is over." Then I walked out, not sparing Mia or Damien another glance. The air outside felt different, lighter. For so long I had felt trapped. First by my accident, then by my own self-pity, and finally by the betrayal of the woman I had once trusted with my life. But now I was free. As I stepped toward my car, Anna was waiting. She leaned against the passenger door, arms crossed, a knowing smile on her lips. "How'd it go?" she asked. I exhaled, shaking my head. "Better than I expected," she chuckled. "So, that's it? You burned it all down?" I glanced back at the building, the empire I had built, the life I had almost lost, and nodded. Not all of it, just the parts that were poisoning me. Anna studied me for a long moment. Then, without warning, she grabbed my tie and pulled me closer. "You did it," she whispered. I smirked. "I had a good coach," she laughed, shaking her head. "So, what now?" I looked up at the sky, feeling the weight of the past finally lift from my shoulders. "Now?" I exhaled. "Now I start over, on my own terms." And with that, I got in the car, leaving behind the wreckage of my old life. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't scare me. It was mine to take, too.